So today we're talking. The topic is ransomware and really what impact ransomware can have on your Microsoft environment. And from our perspective, some strategies that are important around addressing ransomware, but really the security associated with how do we protect that environment.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things where I think the market really gets confused about what ransomware is and what it impacts more specifically. And the focus that the manufacturing space and security has been, let's build more tools, more technology to protect X, protect Y, and it becomes an arms race of which tool is the best tool to do whatever. The challenge is there's much more to it, and there's a couple of contextual things that have been shifting, and I'm using that word purposefully in the industry, in the context of, for example, software lifecycle development. We have this notion of shift left. We used to come and I'm kind of gray-haired here, so back when I was writing code as a kid, security was something you thought about after you wrote your code. You would bring in the security team to evaluate what you wrote, look at the code, make sure there was no SQL injection or other problems. So now we have this concept. We shifted to a shift left methodology, which is let's take security and move it left in the timeline from a development perspective. And more companies got to a point where, similarly with infrastructure, security ended up being an afterthought. Is we've got this network, we've got our infrastructure, we know people can't get in our network because we have firewalls, but wait, that's not the case anymore. They figured out how to get past our firewalls and trick our users into giving their credentials up and so on and so forth. And so it's that same shift left, and what the shift left context that I've been calling it for infrastructure and IT as a whole is a compliance-led security approach. And what do I mean by that? Compliance-led could mean a lot of things. It's what if I'm not regulated? It's not about what is governing you. There is something governing you. It might be self-imposed. It might be a industry regulation. It might be a government regulation. But every one of us has some sort of self-imposed set of controls. And the way to think about it is the litigators, they say you need to do the following things to be a productive member of society. Then the sheriffs make sure you're doing those things. And if you don't, they take corrective actions and solve it. And security is not very different from that. We have this concept of we create what is governing how we work, how we do the things we do, how we protect customer data, how we protect our own data. And then we build control sets that we have to comply to, and that's the security controls. A lot of times security was, let's get the tools and figure out which controls they close. And my belief is that we need to focus the energy in reverse and say, what is it that we need to comply with? And let's identify what is the best way to protect or implement that control in a technology and a process and human resources or whatever the case may be. So fast forward to this topic. If everybody is focusing on tools, tool to solve this problem, Microsoft creates a gazillion tools. If we're talking about Office 365, aren't we protected on their platform?
Well, I think the other aspect too is, and if you've been watching our sound bites, you've been hearing Shaheen and I for years now talking about tools, and the technology debt that's associated with these tools. Mm-hmm. But I think the other aspect too, and we were talking about this yesterday, is the tools are all designed to keep people out. Mm-hmm. And we just chuckled at the firewall comment.
Yep.
They're getting in. And the net now is that, I think the focus is on how quickly we can respond when they do get in. Mm-hmm. And then the other aspect of this whole idea, especially around Microsoft and the Office 365 environment, is they're getting in. So ransomware is happening, deletion's happening, encryption is happening. So
what you're saying is maybe what Microsoft embeds in their platforms isn't enough.
Well, there's no question it's not enough.
And then what we buy after the fact to go and protect it even further isn't enough. And that's the continuous thought process that we kind of want to get you thinking about, is that thinking about solving a problem with, I just got to do this thing today, whatever this thing is, only solves the problem for a short period of time. And this is the I would say the distinctive difference in the white dog approach is we don't think about things as a point in time answer. We try to think about, here is where the state of the attack surface and the protection of that attack surface and the recovery after an incident looks like, what the state of that is today. But what happens as new technologies, and in part of today's context is we're talking about the Microsoft ecosystem, and one of the key components of the Microsoft ecosystem is Copilot. More and more companies are going to turn on Copilot for their users, and now we are giving Copilot access to our Office 365 tenancy in order to be able to accelerate our users' productivity.
Right.
Like, how do we take any average intern and turn them into a copywriter? We give them Copilot and we give them access to all of our collateral. We let them create service descriptions and specifications because it's so much easier. They don't have to be an expert. And then all you need is your architects and senior product people to evaluate the output and make tweaks instead of having to create content from the ground up.
Well, now we're giving access to all of our information, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of our core information, our crown jewels, our IP, our PII, our corporate information, that all now from the infrastructure that it's in or that we're trying to protect now, Copilot has access to that.
Yep.
Right.
So what do we do? I mean, that's really the crux of this conversation. The issue is we have spent too much time, as Brian said earlier, trying to figure out how to keep the bad guys out. They're not going to stay out. No matter how good we are, no matter what we do, they're going to get in, because all it takes is one user to click on one email that gets them to one bad site that didn't have tools on the machine and isn't protected, and now they have credentials, they're on the system, they're in your network, and they begin figuring out how to crawl around. So our answer to that is, let's take their dwell time down from 6 months on average to 6 minutes. But that's still not going to keep them out, because they're in. Dwell time happened. They got in even for 6 minutes, but they got in. And what bad actors are now starting to do is take advantage of these negative generative AI solutions to build attacks that initiate the minute they land on an automated way, as opposed to, let me go figure out the crown jewels and all the things and where it is and what it all is. And now they're starting to target the repositories where our generative AIs that we're using internally are getting their content. So now it all like starts to circle together. So backing up for a second, this is almost, we talked quickly when we were wrapping up the year about what's coming. And we recently spoke to an editor that also we talked about what's coming. And one of the things that we're excited about here is our data risk management offering that we're coming out in the first quarter. And contextually, data risk management, we used to think about it in the notion of DLP, and it was the opposite of let's not let them in. It was let's not let the data get out. And the issue with that approach is now you have to go and figure out which data do we not want to let get out. And we have to create a taxonomy of, this is classified data, this is public data, this is internal only, and that taxonomy now has to be applied as metadata to every one of your documents, unstructured assets, so that the DLP solution can figure out what to do with it. So fast forward, we got smarter. We decided we were going to scan the documents and try to interpret what they are. And we've made some success in the industry and had some good valuable tools that actually were able to say, I see content in here that looks like PCI. I see content in here that looks like HIPAA, or whatever the case may be. But the problem still existed. DLP still was a notion of, now that I've found PCI, I'm not going to let PCI data be attached to an email. I'm not going to let it be sent out of the organization. It was all blocks. Like, let's prevent it from being shared publicly so somebody who shouldn't have access doesn't get access. We think that model's broken. We got up and spoke about VPNs are broken, and there's a reason why Zero Trust Network Access has to replace VPN going forward. There's and buyer beware, not all ZTNA solutions are equal. Similarly, DLP is broken.
Yeah.
DLP is fundamentally a solution that was trying to solve a problem, and it's the IC, every single nail IC or every single screw IC looks like a nail, so I'm going to use a hammer to solve the problem, and DLP was a hammer.
But you talk about technology debt associated with those platforms, as you described. The amount of policy writing, policy mitigation, discovery, assignment, the amount of effort on the back end from a technology standpoint that the engineers have to in supporting an application like that. We had a huge customer, I'm not going to say their name, but we implemented over 3 years. We implemented a DLP solution, and it was an absolute headache.
And year four,
we
had to go back and refresh all the policies.
Right.
Year 5, we had to go back and refresh all the policies. It never ends.
Well, it never ended, but it actually never really truly came to full fruition because of the challenges associated with just managing the application alone.
It can't. And our community is managed service providers and system integrators who we're preaching to the choir. You guys have all done DLP projects, and so why am I bringing this context up? We are launching our DRM offering, which is really focused on let's classify the data into what kind of regulatory classification it fits into, that is on our workstations, that is on our file servers, that is in our OneDrive, in our SharePoint, in our Teams. And then once we have it and we understand the risk associated with that data being ransomed, let's be able to push button encrypt everything. That's the solution, is like they're going to get the data. How about if they get it, it's invaluable to them. It doesn't have any value. It's encrypted. They can't do anything with it. When they send you the ransomware request, you can say, go ahead and publish the encrypted data. Good luck with that. So that's kind of the contextual shift of mindset. But that's only really, again, talking about protection, because if they do a ransomware attack, that ransomware attack has encrypted your environment, and you're waiting for the encryption keys or decryption keys to be able to recover it. So this is the big missing part, and there's an entire conference dedicated to Write a Boom, which is really the context of, okay, we built all this technology and capability that is really designed to jump in, take action at the moment of attack execution. So not the 6 months before when they got into your network, but the minute they pulled the trigger. All of our tool not, and when I say our, I mean the industry, not White Dog. All the tools in the industry are designed to be reactive to a behavior. And we call them proactive security, but they are reactive to a behavior happening, and then they get proactive. So to me, retroactive or post-active reactivity is really reactive. So we've got the tools, we've got the capabilities. Let's just assume we picked the best technologies in the industry and we deployed them. Now we need to recover after the attack, because the attack's going to happen. None of these tools can effectively 100% of the time prevent ransomware. So that Write a Boom, the ability to do incident response and have your incident response planning, have your tabletop exercises done so that your team knows what to do, when to do it, having your contracts lined up with your cyber insurance to bring in forensics, with your whoever your IR team is to do IR. By the way, if you're a White Dog partner, you know who your IR partner is. It's all included. But all of that is so required. And I had an interesting conversation with a partner that said, I thought you guys were a security company. Why do you have SaaS backup? And I said, because you have to have Write a Boom, and 90% of the SaaS backup solutions in the market are terrible. They don't do full recovery. They don't do granular or brick level, for those of us who were Exchange people, recovery. And there's a lot of infrastructure to allow them to work. So we've created an offering that allows our partners to resell it simply, that allows you to recover point in time, single files, single emails, single calendar items, across
at scale.
At scale,
right?
Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive, which means that it's actually backing up all the data on your workstations as well that are being synced up to OneDrive.
So let's talk about the challenge there. So for a lot of our MSP partners, they're focused on the Microsoft environment. A lot of the environments of, I would say, the small media market, very Microsoft focused. A lot of our partners that have partnered with White Dog are Microsoft experts. They offer those IT services in managing those Microsoft environments. So let's talk about that challenge. So we kind of hinted that, well, Microsoft has a lot of tools, right? And our partners are working to try to manage those tools. But we also see that those tools aren't necessarily working. So let's kind of talk about the environment a bit with respect to why we need something different than what Microsoft brings to the table, and especially around Office 365 environments. So
to be fair, before we dive too far deep into that, we're not saying that Microsoft's technology stack doesn't work, because that's not the message we're trying to portray here. What we're saying is Microsoft has done, as they always do in the IT space, they've developed a solid platform that operates and is the productivity suite, and the data suite supporting it behind it. What protections they've put in place are the bare minimum protections in case you don't have anything.
Right.
They're not intended to be the answer, the end all. They're just, if you're a small company and don't want to go invest in the right tools to do data recovery, we can get you back emails from a deleted
from 14 to 30 days ago.
Exactly.
Right.
So, but don't come back 6 months from now and say, hey, I deleted an email. Can we recover it? The answer would be no with their basic tools. Don't try to recover a single file in SharePoint unless it's in the garbage can, because you can restore the whole database and wipe out any work you did. So there's the tools work, they're functional, and they do exactly what they say they're supposed to do. But the protections in terms of the ability to recover, backup data protection and recovery, those things are pretty minimal capabilities built into the platform.
And that's kind of the key path that I was going down from a standpoint of the ability to recover, which was one of the key things you said. So we know they're getting in. So how do we protect the data at rest? We talk about, White Dog's solution from a standpoint of encrypting data, identifying encrypted in place, but they're going to get in. The Microsoft tools have that minimalist approach, right? But they were designed that way from a standpoint of mail. Mail is 15 to 30 days, right? Nothing past that. SharePoint and OneDrive are 93 days, right? Up to that point. But if you look at the way Microsoft designed the tools, right? And the retention policies are really for legal and compliance reasons. They're not set up for at-scale recovery because they're based on versioning, right? So the threat, I think, is that if someone comes in and takes that data to recover, that's fine. But the recovery mechanism within Microsoft really is based upon how the malware impacted the environment. Did they delete? Did they encrypt? Or did they exfiltrate? And then regardless of that methodology, you now have to recover. Well, you only have 93 days to recover on a standard Microsoft. No, it works, but up to 93 days around SharePoint. And that's the standard, again, like if you're using the basis.
So it's important to note when a ransomware event happens, this individual has been in your network for more than a few days.
Well, right.
So it's possible they were there more than 90 days ago, for one thing, and they've dropped little seeds where they can go back and reinitiate the attack even if you recover. You also need to have a clear understanding of when the data was impacted, right, so that you can roll back to the right version. Now, the issue with version control is that version control is something, it's a policy that's set by your admin. So your admin might say, we're only going to keep 2 versions of a document. So now you don't have 93 days. Right. You have literally the ability to recover from the garbage can, and the garbage can policy is also something that can be set. So if your IT admin decides we're going to do a 15-day garbage retention, you only have 15 days. So these are things Microsoft has defaults, but we as IT individuals have the ability to override defaults and set them. So there's the mistake that a lot of organizations make is they assume, and it started back when cloud became a thing, it's in AWS, it's in Azure, it's security is their problem. And it's not. That's why the shared accountability matrices came out. It's their responsibility to protect physical security. It's your responsibility to protect application and all the layers above the below the application down to the physical infrastructure. So everything from virtualization up, all your responsibility as an organization, even if it's running in AWS's cloud environment. So you can't abdicate responsibility. Similarly, as we're talking about Microsoft and Office 365 and all of the collaboration tools around it, Microsoft has built a stack that operates, and there's a shared accountability table associated with who does what, and data protection is not Microsoft's responsibility, it's yours.
Right.
And in that accountability table, they give the very basics so that you can recover from a complete failure because they do full restores of the database. That loses an awful lot of work. Granularity and brick level recovery is key sometimes because only a couple of files might have got encrypted, not every file. And so as let me give you a scenario. Let's say that the ransomware attack hit 3 days ago. It took your cyber insurance team a week to 2 weeks to jump in and start responding. By the time you get to the point where you're now ready to recover files and you're in SharePoint, the hackers already deleted everything in the garbage can because they had admin credentials. So you can't go to the trash can and recover.
They have access to versions.
They've deleted the versions, so you can't go back to versions. So now you have to do a recovery, but your business didn't stop. The files that weren't encrypted, people were changing and editing and modifying. So you got 2 weeks of changes, and you're going to roll back now the entire database to 2 weeks ago and wipe out all the work your company did for 2 weeks. There's going to be a lot of angry end users at that point, and that lost productivity might translate to financial impact to the company.
And now, if you had a backup as a service or a SaaS backup that was now creating actually snapshot, because versioning is not snapshot, right? It's not point in time, and versioning is not a backup strategy, right? So if you had that in place, then you could have snapshotted and
restored just those files that were impacted.
Right.
That's part of the key thing. So as we pull all of this back together contextually, we've dropped a lot of data on here. Resilience in this day and age is all about the ability to recover at a granular level, no matter what happens.
And at scale.
Yeah,
that's the key.
And no matter what happens, it's like, it doesn't matter if it was ransomware, it doesn't matter if it was human error, it doesn't matter if it was system failure or weather or you name it. You have to be able to recover from whatever the incident was at a granular level so you're not impacting productivity across the organization as a whole. The second thing is when you look at these things, that concept of data classification is really important in the notion of risk identification. So now that I've classified data and I know how much data I have out there and where that data is, and by the way, what it's going to cost me if I get ransomed, now I have a metric to say, here is the impact, the risk associated with this data getting stolen. And bring in a lot of factors here. Bring in your email data, your SharePoint data, your OneDrive data, your Teams data. Tap Copilot into all of those data assets. And now you've got an ecosystem that relies heavily on what you have built from documentation, unstructured data throughout your environment. And if you very clearly can identify, I can't do business if my team can't use Copilot against these documents, now the risk level of those documents goes up. So tying things together in this context of it is Microsoft calls their data ecosystem the Dataverse. And honestly, it's brilliant because they have created a mechanism now where all of the data in the Microsoft ecosystem is something you have access to make business decisions from. But let's back up. You have to shift left. You have to think about protections. You have to think about recovery. You have to think about not just keeping the bad guys out of this environment with layers and layers of security. There's email, DNS, identity, endpoint, network, and then you have policy-based stuff like in identity. Do we have 2FA turned on and enabled and enforced for every single player? Are we using a third-party identity provider? All of these factors really add complexity and challenge. And wouldn't it be great if there was an assessment that could quickly tell you, here's the risks we see at a high level, and here's the things we would address upfront.
But not just that, but that with the click of a button, be able to implement a protection schema that protects that information in its place.
Yeah.
So this is what I find so exciting as we come into 25. White Dog just continues to innovate with respect to our platform. And again, curated, composable platform that's deliverable inside of 30 days for our partners. These challenges that continue to come up for our partners' customers, because really it's our end users that are addressing these challenges, is that we continue to innovate to deliver solutions that help our partners to actually take the next step and continue to add value in their business and add value to their customers. Yeah. So to your point, with our XDR, we've got the mail covered, we've got DNS covered, we've got the endpoint covered, we've got user identity covered, we've got network covered. So from that aspect, those layers are there. But now, shift left. Now we're looking at the content. We're looking at the value of the data. They're getting in. Your work, our partners' work, every single day is because they're getting in. Protect the data where it's at, and then if they do get in and we are impacted, how do we recover? And how quickly can you recover? White Dog continues to innovate to bring that solution to market.
Exactly. And, part of where I think that most of the industry falls short is they're not doing the proactive side of security. They're doing, it's called, it's preventative because it's reactive, because it's doing something the minute something bad happens. But why wait till the bad actor finds the gap? What we try to do is we try to do a lot of proactive things in our stack that help our partners and our end customers through those partners make decisions about what risks they're going to address. There's no difference in this data risk model we're talking about. There's 3 layers for us that protect Office 365 and the assets if you ignore all the rest of the XDR stuff. We do API-based inbox threat detection and response, crawling through the inboxes and finding existing threats that made it past the security gateways, made it past Microsoft's or any other third-party gateway that is trying to block and tackle inbound bad emails that contain malware, contain URLs, contain links, that are phishing attempts, that are ad account impersonation, and the 13 other attacks that can be targeted at an inbox. That's the first layer. So try to protect the largest threat vector, which is email, and reduce the noise is the best way to talk about that. The second layer of protection is the SaaS data protection that we talked about. And that SaaS data protection is really designed for it's not just Microsoft. There's about 13 different SaaS properties we can protect, but the entire Microsoft ecosystem, including Dynamics, we were able to back up and recover at a granular level, which is a very challenging and difficult thing that most tools do poorly. Take that API-based inbox detection and response, and now also apply it to SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams, and do document scans for malware that's sitting out in those locations. Then on top of that, now add this data risk management offering that we're bringing in. So even if you do nothing at the endpoint or network or the others, if you're a all Microsoft play as a partner, we're going to enable you to protect the Microsoft ecosystem for your customers without having to go and investigate, evaluate, integrate, and figure out contracts with all of the manufacturers that make these things happen. And we commit to continuously improving that stack. So very simply put, our XDR for partners who are on our platform, our XDR offering will be enhanced to include a data risk assessment at no additional cost to you for existing customers that will scan their network and scan their cloud environment for Office 365 and give you a risk report of what would happen, a monetary value for what would happen if their at-risk data was ransomed. And that's coming in the second quarter.
So continued exciting stuff from White Dog. I think for partners that are out there, if you've got questions around these platforms, please reach out to your White Dog team. If you're watching this and you're interested, go to whitedogcyber.com. We have a partner page there. We're happy to get requests. We're happy to reach out and talk to you about any one of these platforms or capabilities. But feel free to reach out to us with any questions around our platform.